Welcome to another video on the Fossil Record. My name is Benjamin Berger, and I'm excited to talk about one of the most iconic dinosaurs of the early Cretaceous period. A dinosaur that I've not talked much about before, and that is Spinosaurus. Now, part of the fame of Spinosaurus comes from its, of course, gigantic size and being featured in the third Jurassic Park movie. But it's also famous because of the serendipitous story of its discovery in Egypt, its destruction during World War II, and its recent resurrection in 2014. Our story begins with a bricklayer named Richard Markov, who grew up in what is today the Czech Republic in Europe. Bricklaying was not his first love. It was just a way to make money for his true passion, and that was music, particularly playing the piano. Once he became skilled at playing the piano, he joined a musical band to tour the great cities of the world. And while he was visiting the city of Cairo in Egypt, he found a permanent job playing piano in the lobby of the Shepherd's Hotel. The hotel was famous at the time for its opulence along the Nile River. It had these beautiful stained glass windows, Persian carpets, and these really pretty gardens. They had these big pillars in the lobby, kind of in the style of a lot of the surrounding Egyptian temples. And its drinking establishment was frequented by Americans, the French, the British. Any other world traveler visiting Cairo during that time would stay at this hotel. It also had these beautiful, famous late night dances with beautiful women in evening gowns, and they were all dancing and listening to Markov's beautiful piano music. It was also the center of culture in Egypt during the turn of the last century, and many of the visiting European and American explorers would stop by the hotel before they headed out on archaeological and paleontological expeditions into the Egyptian desert. Now, Richard Markov, he learned to speak fluent Arabic. And one day in 1897, he was approached by a visiting guest of the hotel, a geologist named Eberhard Franz from Stuttgart, Germany. Now, Franz would later go on to discover dinosaurs in the Teneguru Formation in East Africa, what is today Tanzania. And while Franz was in Egypt, he became friends with Markov, and the two began exploring the deserts together, with Markov learning from Franz how to identify fossil bones in the field. Markov continued his explorations after Franz left and began to make his own private collection of fossils, most of these coming from the Fayum Depression near Cairo. In 1901, Ernest Freihard Stromer von Rickenbach, another geologist and another guest at the hotel, learned about Markov's interests, and the two of them became friends over their shared passion and interest in fossils and rocks. Now, Ernst Freihard Stromer von Rickenbach, simply known as Stromer, was of a noble family back in Germany, and he had some family wealth in order to pursue his travels in Egypt. So together, Markov and Stromer sat down and they began to plan out a future expedition out into the desert beyond what had previously been explored in the Fayum, and hoping to reach rock layers further away and deeper into the west desert of Egypt. But they would have to wait until they saved enough money to launch this expedition. Now, Markov continued to make his living playing the piano at night at the hotel, but he was frequently asked to help with paleontological expeditions into the desert. In 1907, for example, he helped the American Museum with their expedition to the Fayum Depression, collecting mostly Eocene and Oligocene mammals, and he continued to send fossils to his friend Stromer in Germany during this period of time. In 1910, Markgraf and Stromer set out on their great expedition together into Western Egypt. And along the way, they began to find some fossil reptiles in the region southeast of the Fayum Depression, but not much. So, kind of disappointed, Stromer returned back to the city of Cairo, while Markgraf and his crew continued on and eventually found a beautiful primate skull that became called Lydiopithecus Markgraf, which bears his name. When Markgraf returned back, he found Stromer at the hotel was already busy planning for the next trip into the desert, to leave immediately and to visit the far-off Bahrain oasis. Now, the second trip was off to a bad start because as they left and were heading out to the desert, they forgot to pack food for the camels that they rode on. And so they eventually had to abandon the camels and set out on foot for a very long hike into the desert. Markgraf started to become very ill along the way, and he eventually told Stromer that he was turning back. However, Stromer, at this point, he had not found any fossils. He was determined to find something. And so he took off and continued on into the desert and finally arrived in the Bahrain oasis, a distance of 373 kilometers from Cairo. It was during this time, on his own, that Stromer found large bones in the layers of rocks around the oasis. And he quickly set about excavating these large bones, and over the course of the next 6 weeks, he had a really nice collection of dinosaur bones for the museum back in Germany. So Stromer returned to Germany and packed up all these fossils that he and Markgraf had discovered that season and sent them back to Germany. Now, Spinosaurus was named in 1912 based on some of these fossils that he had found in the Bahrain oasis. There was a set of denities, these are the lower jaws that had a bunch of teeth. He had some of the spinal bones, part of the fragments of the basal part of the skull. He had a straight piece of the left maxilla, the upper jaw. But most of the fossils were cervical vertebrae, 7 dorsal vertebrae, and the dorsal vertebrae were really unique. They had these really long, elongated neural spines that measured up to 1.65 meters in height, really tall. Also some sacral vertebrae, some single caudal vertebrae, and some ribs, some thoracic ribs. And he also found a few gastralia or belly ribs. Now, during this period of time, Markgraf's illness that he came down with while leaving the expedition started to get worse and worse, and he was unable to collect and send any more fossils to Stromer during this period of time. And sadly, he eventually died in 1915. Now, around this time, Stromer's life was going splendidly well. He published his work on dinosaurs, and that attracted a lot of attention in the scientific community. He married his love in 1920. He had 3 sons they began to raise in the early 1920s. And everything was going really splendidly well until World War II happened. So Stromer was forced to send his 3 sons to war as soldiers during World War II to fight on the side of Germany, and soon he learned of their sad fate. So the initial bad news he heard was that one of his sons had died in the war. Then his second son had died in battle. And finally, hearing no news about his third son, he eventually got word that he had been killed in a prisoner camp. And to add some more misery in poor Stromer's life during this time, in April of 1944, during an Allied bombing raid on Munich, the Museum of Natural History was destroyed, including the dinosaur bones of Spinosaurus, the holotype specimen, the only known specimen of Spinosaurus, was gone. In the ashes of World War II, there was a glimmer of hope, because in 1950, a miracle happened, an incredible miracle. Stromer's son, Wolfgang, his third son, that he thought he had died 6 years before during the war, he was found alive. He had been sentenced to death twice while in prison, but he was finally released by the Soviet Union. And Stromer learned of his son's existence, and he was even able to attend his son's wedding before Stromer died in 1952. Now, it was also during this period in the 1950s and 60s that dinosaurs really started to begin to capture people's attention, the public's attention, again, like never before. And the mysterious dinosaur Spinosaurus attracted a fair amount of attention because we had no specimens, yet we knew that it existed. In the 1970s, many teeth began to be found in Morocco and Tunisia in rock layers of similar age as those near the Bahrain oasis, and compared very closely to the photographs and casts that had survived of the destroyed holotype specimen of Spinosaurus. So it was Morocco and Tunisia that would play a major role in the new discoveries of Spinosaurus. New fossils started to be reported by French and Canadian researchers from the lower Cretaceous Chemkin beds of Morocco. Now, most of these specimens featured parts of the jaw bones and associated teeth, which have these very unique kind of serrated or kind of grooved appearance in the enamel, and they're elongated into these kind of long conical points. Now, one of the things that helped scientists greatly during the 1980s was the remarkable discovery of Baryonyx from Surrey, England. Now, this fossil is one of the most complete theropod dinosaur skeletons from England. It's a remarkable dinosaur for the country, which bears close similarity with its larger cousin, Spinosaurus. Based on the similar grooved teeth and the strange snout, as well as fish scales that were found in the stomach of Baryonyx, Baryonyx was inferred as a fish-eating dinosaur. And furthermore, it had these large hand claws that were found, indicating large gripping hands for the dinosaur, and some elongated neural spines along the back. So here was a creature that gave us a more complete picture of what Spinosaurus might have looked like. However, Baryonyx was smaller, estimated around 9 meters in length, compared to the estimates of 14 or 15 meters in length for Spinosaurus. The other thing about Baryonyx and what it revealed was that Spinosaurus was a member of a broader family of theropod dinosaurs that were living in the early Cretaceous, which were adapted to eating fish. Now, while new fragmentary specimens, mostly jaws and teeth, were found of Spinosaurus, no new skeletons were known until a new discovery in 2014. That year, a new skeleton of Spinosaurus was reported from Morocco, FSAC KK 11888, and described by Nizar Ibrahim, a Moroccan paleontologist who now teaches in England. Now, Ibrahim's discovery led to a better picture of the large skeleton of Spinosaurus, and it gave us some new information about this dinosaur. It filled in the hind limb, which was not preserved in the holotype. And also the skeleton featured a really broad and wide tail. with tall neural arches and ventral chevron spines off the caudal centrum vertebrae, which was unknown before. There were kind of a few bones that overlapped with the holotype, including those long neural spines of the dorsal vertebrae. Now, there was some, head scratching regarding this new specimen and how it compared to the original specimen in Egypt, because the hind legs, when they were scaled to the right size, they appeared so much smaller than would be expected from the size based on the specimen in Egypt. This kind of led people to suggest the specimen from Morocco and Egypt might be too different from each other to give a single picture of the creature. It's a little bit like sticking two people living today, say, like the hind legs of Michael Jordan, and sticking them onto the body of Danny DeVito. They both are the same species, but they're different individuals with different body proportions. So while a really cool specimen, the Frankenstein skeleton of the two individuals, well, it's got some issues if we're going to use it as the definitive example of the reconstructed skeleton of Spinosaurus. Nevertheless, most people agreed with the main point regarding the new specimen. The broad tail, the smaller hind limb, the fish-eating diet likely indicated Spinosaurus was aquatic or semi-aquatic, envisioning the animal using its broad tail to swim through the water. So one way to test whether Spinosaurus is aquatic is to look at the ratio of oxygen isotopes in the enamel of its teeth. So oxygen comes in 3 flavors, but 2 are fairly common. These are oxygen 18 and oxygen 16. Water contains 1 atom of oxygen, 2 atoms of hydrogen, and the oxygen that's in living animals comes primarily from drinking water as well as breathing from the atmosphere. Hence, the ratio of the flavors of oxygen, called isotopes, is related to the place or habitat that the animal lives within. Fresh and ocean water, oxygen contains more oxygen 18 than places far from the ocean, say out in a dry desert. And that is because oxygen 18 has more mass, so it stays at higher levels near the ocean and really big bodies of water. So aquatic animals that spend a lot of time in the water will have a ratio that shows more oxygen 18 relative to animals that live far away from the water, say in a upland terrestrial environment. Researchers in 2010 measured the oxygen ratios of Spinosaurus teeth, and they found that they are similar to what are found in aquatic animals like turtles and crocodiles living in the same environment. Now, one thing to mention with this study is that Spinosaurus and turtles and crocodiles all eat fish. And so they are taking in oxygen 18 from the aquatic habitat of the food that they eat as well. So this could reflect diet more than its similar style of complete submergence in water, like living crocodiles and turtles. Additional evidence for the aquatic habitat of Spinosaurus comes from a condition called pachyosteias. A pachyostic bone is where the animal or animals that spend a long time in the water, they actually increase the growth of the compact outer layer of the lamella bone and reduce the inner cavities of the bone marrow. This kind of results basically in thicker, denser, and heavier bones. This helps keep the body submerged and is found in hippos, sea cows, whales, and dolphins, as well as aquatic turtles and crocodiles. Studies of the cross-sectional area of Spinosaurus, as well as Baryonyx and other spinosaurids, show that this feature was common in the group. But Spinosaurus in particular shows really thick, dense bone, representing a pachyostic condition. This condition supports a behavior of the dinosaur spending a fairly long period submerged in the water. However, another paper published in the same year reconstructed 3D computer models based on the known bones to make an animated model to examine how aquatic the dinosaur truly was. The results of the model appear to support Spinosaurus as a semi-aquatic bipedal ambush fish-eating dinosaur that frequented the margins of the coastal and inland waterways, but was not fully submerging itself in the water for long periods of time. Instead, they kind of envisioned it stalking along the shoreline for fish, and this predicted a little bit more terrestrial locomotion compared with the other studies. Now, one thing to bear in mind in these computer models is that they are based on the combination of different individual skeletons and bones that we know do not belong to the same individual. So the proportional small hind legs may be a little off, resulting in a body with a center of mass that's just too far forward in the body, making it, well, kind of awkward or difficult to model its locomotor behavior. But, it's all we can do until we find better specimens and a better skeleton of Spinosaurus. There's still some conflict in the literature regarding how truly aquatic Spinosaurus was in life, but we know that it likely spent time in rivers and lakes and even in the ocean hunting for fish and other aquatic vertebrates to feed on. But we really don't know if this feeding behavior was similar to a living stork or submerged in the water like a living crocodile.